What's up, HorrorClix fans? Sarcanus here, and today I'll be narrating all of the flavor text from the base set. While the flavor text in the base set is some of the least detailed as the world was just beginning to be fleshed out, there are still a number of recurring story elements that lend themselves to a cohesive HorrorClix canon. Also important to note is that not all monsters in the base set, or in any set, have flavor text, as some of their cards display abilities on both sides. Those figures will be noted at the end, for completion's sake. So without further ado, I give you the world of HorrorClix. Subject exhibits extreme acute symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Delusions of grandeur include discussing a hidden inner beast, best described as a Jungian wolf archetype. The vampire cabals of the New World are packs of rabid dogs, preying on the lowest refuse of society. They provoke and murder without hesitation or forethought of political consequences. Though I cannot doubt their effectiveness, many of my peers already use them as enforcers, assassins, and bodyguards. I fear that if we do not police our own, our society could revert back to the monstrous heritage from whence it came. For 2 days the team searched the abandoned slaughterhouse, trying to find any sign of what happened to my partner. I thought at first he'd had a run-in with some local gang kids, or maybe he'd stumbled on a big drug sale. But the only thing we found was Casey's flashlight, bent nearly in half, as if some terrible monster had torn it from his hand and crumpled it like an empty soda can. Police are baffled by a string of recent murders in the Bay Area. The only common link between these crimes is that the killer takes his victims' severed heads as trophies. Although police have refused to comment on any leads, it is starting to look like San Francisco has another serial killer on the loose. I tried to run, but Angelique lashed out her whip and tangled my ankles, tripping me face first to the pavement. I managed to roll over, only to have her dig the point of one of her stiletto heels into my throat. She looked down at me with a fanged sneer that dripped with contempt. The pain was exquisite. My breathing became erratic. As I blacked out, I realized that deep down, I was enjoying every moment. As the last of his werewolf bodyguards were cut to pieces, Ramos sprinted across the tarmac towards the waiting jet, idle in hand. But just as he reached the metal stairs, he felt a slight tug at his elbow. Shocked, the dealer turned to see his own severed arm twitching on the ground beside him, idol still clutched between rigid fingers. "No bargains this time, Ramos," Dominique hissed through her fangs as she raised her twin swords to strike. Each one was ruthless and beautiful and deadly, but Natasha, she was their queen. In a world of men, the Razor Vixens were powerful, masterful, and godlike, but next to the eldest, they felt like awkward schoolgirls still waiting to be kissed. They watched her, learned from her, desired her, and hated her. They all competed for her affections, while their dark fathers sat back and delighted in their struggles for dominance. Subject exhibits clear signs of advanced stages of cellular reprogramming and reproduction. DNA testing reveals that the human aspect of subject's genome pattern now accounts for less than 25% of her overall genetic material. Last night, subject regained consciousness long enough to talk, and the mere sound of her voice put Watkins into Danvers Mental Asylum on extended medical leave. She stood on the dock facing out toward Devil's Reef. "There," she croaked. "Can't you feel the call?" I shook my head, hearing only the slap of the waves striking the pilings 15 feet below. But when she peeled back her lips, no longer human, and emitted a peculiar wailing cry, this time I heard the answer without difficulty. Within moments, 100 similar voices answered from beneath the waves, each offering its own part in her otherworldly song of summoning. As I approached the door, I paused only long enough to examine the bolts that held the portal in place. My host nodded and bade me to look through the small sliding window. Inside, she rested on a filth-splattered bed and looked up at me with her enormous, inhuman eyes. Before I could help myself, I started to desperately unfasten the bolts. My host, reacting quickly, pistol-whipped me to the ground and leveled his gun at my face. "Now," he asked, "now do you understand their power to control?" This is Unit 152, over. Evacuation is nearly complete, though I think I've found another dead one. Copy that. Body bag to the East Wing, 2nd floor. He's a ripe one, dispatch. What the hell? How can he still be alive? Get an ambulance over to the East Wing. We've got a survivor. Ah! Get off me! Get this thing off me! Jenkins thought he'd be safe in the holding cell until help came. After everything went crazy out on the streets, the old drunk figured it'd be safer inside the hoosgow than out. For the most part, he was right. While he survived the first 3 days on chips and sodas, carefully staying out of the reach of the undead prisoners in the adjacent cell, when the police officer arrived and shakily unholstered his gun with his freshly gnawed hand, Jenkins knew that he was a goner. Todd believed he could outrun the zombie, until it drew its firearm and began firing wildly in the cramped hallway. Riddled with bullets, Todd fell heavily to the floor, unable to do anything but writhe in pain. As his lifeblood pumped out onto the dirty concrete, he could do nothing but watch with horror as his partner shuffled closer and closer, all the while drooling strands of pus-covered saliva on the front of his torn shirt. I suppose some people just snap, you know? I had no idea, but I guess the signs were there. He started insisting we call him Sonny, and he never took off that makeup. And then we walk in one day, and he's got this big knife, and he's talking about how he's gonna really start making people laugh. The first one to go was Linda, the production assistant. I've never seen so much blood in one place. We had him cornered, and you could see in his eyes that he knew the jig was up. He dropped the knife, but then he started... Excuse me, this is difficult. He started throwing the decapitated heads. The first one hit Officer Pendle in the chest, and it broke open like a piece of ripe fruit. We opened fire, but he hit Officer Bonds and bit Corrigan before we could put him down. You got it all wrong. You call me a copycat, but I'm the real deal. The original Sonny. I'm back from the dead, and there's a score to settle. None of you are safe. Your children. Your children are mine, because who doesn't like a clown? I'll mail you some pieces if you'd like. Little keepsakes. Say a finger or a toe. I keep their heads, so it's only fair you get a piece to write about. Hiding under the kitchen sink, I listened to the wolf's claws click across the linoleum. I still can't imagine how the thing ended up in the heart of New York City, especially on the 17th floor of my building. The only thing that saved me was the security guard knocking on the front door. The beast was on him in an instant. I managed to climb out onto the fire escape just in the nick of time. Packs of wolves once terrorized the remote town of Charity, Wyoming, preying upon livestock and settlers alike. They were led by a giant wolf, a beast with eyes like burning coals. The townsfolk soon came to call the beast the Demon. By the end of the cold winter of 1917, every last citizen of Charity had either fled or been killed by the Demon and his pack, except for one, my grandfather, Art Tarnowski. Art Tarnowski, resident of Manhattan, was mauled to death Saturday night in Central Park by a pack of feral dogs. At the age of 89, Mr. Tarnowski was a respected member within the community. He served his country overseas during the Second World War, earning a number of medals for distinguished service. Why Art was seen fleeing from his Manhattan apartment into Central Park in the dead of night still stands as an unanswered mystery for his family and friends. The chamber was thick with the smell of sulfur. Brother Thomas rolled on the floor screaming and trying to beat out the flames. I knew I could not break my focus to help him, or both of us would be dead. The vile abomination just glared at me, flaming spittle dripping from its lips, each drop hissing as it hit the hardwood floor. You can get used to bullet holes, severed limbs, and even burnt bodies, but the sight of a guy who bought it from acid burns, that'll mess with your head for a long time. Especially when it's one of those little bile-puking SOBs that did it. It just cauterizes the wounds as it burns through. You can see straight through a man, muscle, lung, brains. It's like Swiss freaking cheese. It makes me gag just thinking about it. The Soviets ran into some trouble with these little bastards in a small Siberian town near Didenka. Back in the late 60s, their psyops were conducting some truly asinine experiments with portals. The imps just swarmed through, infested the village, and then wormed into every chimney, crawl space, and drainage tunnel in town. They lost 3 containment teams before they finally nuked the damn place. Point is, be careful. Over and over the islanders chanted, "Rana Mai Kata! Rana Mai Kata!" As they gazed into the depths of the volcanic cave, awaiting a response. The earth split behind them, and death, cold and coiling, rose from the soil and consumed them. Of all the world's predators, the snake is the hardest to escape. She is in the trees and on the ground. She is on the rocks and in the water. Only in the air are you safe, but fate did not seem compelled to give us wings to escape. The doctor began to grow delirious, the venom from the serpent's bite now coursing through her veins. At first Marcia thought that one of the villagers had found her and was wrapping some kind of bandage around her wounded arm. But when her vision cleared enough for her to look down, she realized that it wasn't a bandage. It was a thick black snake that had mouthed her arm all the way to the elbow. She wiggled her fingers inside the thing and screamed. Was it voodoo? Some extraterrestrial plague? I'm not sure anyone's left to figure it out. But I know for sure that this isn't how I expected the world to end. Yesterday I got stuck outside the gates with Jones after a scavenging run, and 20 of the damn things swarmed us. I dusted a couple of them, but Jones's shotgun jammed. He was under the pile before he could even call for help. Not much time left. They broke through yesterday. Marty and I are the only 2 left, and he's just about gone. My hand is gray. I know they got me. I can feel it working. I'm so hungry, but I can't keep anything down. Marty just made a run for it, and now it's just me. And I don't think it's gonna be me in a few minutes. Brains. 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 In life, Solomon Wright had the uncanny ability to convince the witnesses they didn't see what they saw, and persuade juries to hear what he wanted them to hear. In death, his talents took on a much more gruesome application, as his self-chosen jury rose to follow him wherever he led. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. If only that were possible now. In a twist of irony, Solomon Wright was drawn to the graves of those he'd sentenced to die. In life, he'd been given the power to condemn men to death. Now, in death, he freed them from that prison. As they rose before him with their soulless eyes, he dully wondered whether they welcomed or hated him now. Tick-tock, the clock strikes 1. Tick-tock, the clock strikes 2. Tick-tock, you better run quick. Tick-tock, or he'll take you too. Just the sound of his one long, dirty fingernail dragging along the wall was nearly enough to make me bolt for it. But I fought down my fear and made myself wait for the time to strike with the piece of heavy pipe. But when that thing shuffled out of the bathroom, dragging Jake behind him, I dropped the pipe and I took off like a bat out of hell and left my friend to die. 3 radiator raps with a long iron pipe, 3 soft knocks on a dead man's door, 3 long mirrors smashed in with a hammer, 3 drowned kittens in a pail on the floor. 1, 2, 3, Mr. Fright, Mr. Fright, who will kill you on this cold, dark night? You are stubborn. It's been 5 years and you're still digging into matters that don't concern you. Did you think you could conceal it from us? Did you think yourself beneath our notice? Yes, for a while. Perhaps 1 human in 1,000 has both the capacity and the obsession needed to become a true vampire hunter. But we learned long ago to take action, long before such a person can master the necessary skills. Suddenly the man was behind me, and his too cold hand was clamped on the back of my neck. If you will not believe that I am what I say I am, then believe the evidence of your eyes, he said softly. I could have snapped your neck before you knew I moved. Before you could draw and fire, I could kill your entire family as they sleep. But I have no desire to harm you and yours, provided you follow my exact instructions. I thought being in a public place would save me, but I couldn't have been more wrong. For 2 days the creature stalked me through New York City, forcing me from one hiding spot to the next. But in Manhattan, in the middle of a dance club, crowded with hundreds of witnesses, the vampire simply hacked his way through the crowd to get to me. The enforcer had my scent. There was nowhere in the world I could hide. Dude, she bit me. I'm telling you, Sheriff, there's something unnatural up there at that camp, the preacher whispered. Something terrible happened to that Jameson girl, and her soul cannot rest until it's been avenged. Well, I don't know about you, preacher, said the sheriff, but I put more faith in Smith and Wesson than in that there book. Then you'll die, the preacher prophesied, just like the rest of them. I don't think that one's like the rest of them. Look at her. She's got a look in her eyes, if you know what I mean. She knows we're up here, and she's trying to find a way in. While the rest of them are out there like animals, Heather looks, I don't know, smart? She's a freaking zombie honor roller, if you ask me. An undead freaking valedictorian. Scarecrow, scarecrow, the moon is full. Scarecrow, scarecrow, now feel its pull. Scarecrow, scarecrow, you know the way. Scarecrow, scarecrow, come down and play. Scarecrow, scarecrow, please don't sit still. Scarecrow, scarecrow, it's time to kill. They tore the damn thing apart and burned what was left in the Chickasaw Town Square. It's easy to destroy the physical parts. It's much harder to erase the sins of an entire community. For a long time, things were quiet. The townsfolk thought they'd put the whole grisly episode behind them. And then the strange sightings began. Folks can dismiss things glimpsed out of the corner of their eyes, and the ramblings of a drunk. But when people start disappearing, that's a different story. Tim ran, tripping through the field, fighting hard to gasp for air. Eyes wide, he paused to listen. For a moment he couldn't hear the sounds of his relentless pursuer. Looking down, the moonlight revealed Darlene's blood splattered all over his uniform. How can this be happening? His mind screamed. We brought it back to protect us. Then he heard it again. That terrible slicing sound. The sound of a scythe cutting relentlessly through the stalks of corn. My grandmother said that once you took the gift of the fairy gold from the leprechaun, as long as you stayed within its rules, no harm would come to you. What she didn't know was that everyone who ended up with a piece of treasure soon earned their own misfortune. Through death and disease, accidents and miscarriages, in time every piece of gold always found its way back to the leprechaun's pot, until it was filled to the brim once again. The legend surrounding the Bloody Shillelagh dates back to when the first Irish immigrants came to the United States seeking refuge from famine and hardship. Unfortunately, one of the bogeymen from their folk tales came with them. Again and again the diminutive creature would trade favors for fairy gold, then curse the families with the worst luck possible once they breached the laws of hospitality. Screaming with fury, the diminutive dwarf vomited from where it perched on the bedrail, covering my grandmother's clean sheets with bile, half-digested meat, and squirming maggots. But she stood her ground, an iron fire poker in hand, and began to speak the final words of banishing. Filled with rage, the leprechaun lifted his shillelagh and smashed my grandmother's head clean off her shoulders, washing the walls and ceiling with bright red blood. "I didn't do it! I didn't kill that guy!" Chunks screamed as he struggled against the guards securing the chair restraints. Once they'd fully restrained him, Warden Locke leaned in real close, an evil smile on his face. "Public wants a killer, Morgan. They don't care who as long as someone dies." Just as the switch was thrown, witnesses heard Morgan screaming his dying words, "I'll kill you first, Locke!" In a bizarre show at the county prison, convicted killer Chet Chunk Morgan was electrocuted at midnight, but shortly after being declared dead, the body, and I'm reading this verbatim from the police report, well, he tore his way out of the restraining chair and ripped out Warden Locke's throat with his bare hands. When the lights flicker in the hallway at midnight, it means someone out there is riding the lightning. If you see the lights flicker at any other time, it means the lightning is coming for you. Most people, they go to work, drink lattes, download their MP3s, and have no freaking clue what's really going on. So when they're confronted with that larger reality, when it hits them smack in the face, they just freeze up. Their whole system shuts down. Once I opened my eyes, I decided that's not how I'm going out. Not me, man. I'm gonna get geared up. I'm gonna fight. The infrared was spiking, but the hyperbolic was still at low to mid-range, so I'm thinking, looks like a free-roaming apparition, we still have plenty of time. I initiated the power-up sequence and began boxing off the room. About halfway through, I saw the frost forming, and I realized this was no FRA. This thing literally lifted me up and threw me against the wall. If I would have panicked then, it would have had me. If it comes down to me or them, it sure as hell isn't gonna be me. It seems these Kanakis was sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of favor in return. They met the things on the little islet with the queer ruins, and it seems them awful pictures of frog fish monsters is supposed to be pictured as things. And yet I saw them in a limitless stream, flopping, hopping, creaking, bleeding, urging inhumanly through the spectral moonlight in a grotesque, malignant saraband of fantastic nightmare, and some of them had tall tiaras of that nameless whitish gold metal, and some were strangely robed. Their forms vaguely suggested the anthropoid, while their heads were the heads of fish, with prodigious bulging eyes that never closed. At the sides of their necks were palpitating gills, and their long paws were webbed. They hopped irregularly, sometimes on 2 legs, and sometimes on 4. Are we not all sinners? It matters not the form of your flesh, or the manner of your countenance. We are all blights before Him, and God Almighty has given me the relic and the righteousness to act on His behalf. I took 3 oaths when I first became a member of the Order. The first was to protect the innocent from harm. The second was to protect our own members from destruction. The third was to defend myself from the corrupting influences of the forces we sought to destroy. In the long run, the first 2 were easy, but that last one, let me tell you, That last one was a real pain in the butt. Susan was the first of the group to make it up the hill to the odd, lonely church. Crying and wet, she pounded on the door until an ancient-looking Mother Superior let her in. She collapsed on the floor, sobbing. When she heard the door being locked behind her, Susan looked up to explain about the others, but the terror coursed through her body when she noticed that the pendant dangling from the nun's rosary was not a cross, but an upside-down pentagram. Johnny, I'm getting really freaked out. This abandoned convent was a bad idea. It's giving me the creeps. Come on, babe, just give it a chance. Hand me my shirt. I want to go. You don't believe all these stupid Mother Superior stories, do you? Johnny, if the stories aren't true, then who the hell is that? Sinners! Each of you little vermin is a sinner. You must be cleansed of your impurity. You seek the pleasures of the body. You are wicked degenerates, and your sins make you unclean. Pain is the only way to purify the filth you've smeared on your souls. I will purify you. We had the beast cornered, but we didn't have enough men to fight it one-on-one. Then she shows up. 5'2" and 110 soaking wet. Says she's been tracking it too and offers to help. I tried to stop her, but she's inside before I can grab her. The door locks, and we hear them fighting. 5 minutes later, she comes out, covered head to toe in blood. All I could do was shake her hand and buy her a 6-pack of beer for the save. I know who you are. Do I know you? ASL, please. I've tracked you from Seoul to San Francisco, and I'm gonna stake you out before the sun comes up. You're a human? Damn straight. You would have to find me first. 2 rows behind you by the copy machine. Say goodnight, bloodsucker. I don't care what you see in the movies, it's never as easy as you might think. A vamp's chest is rock hard, and pounding a stake through it isn't like something you do in your garden. It's like the unlife gives him a little bit of natural protection, but when you got that sweet arm motion down, it's almost second nature, and if you're holding it right, you can feel the stake pierce their black, dead hearts. Jack threw a log on the fire and looked slyly over at the 4 young couples. So by now it'd been 3 days since they'd chained him to that tree, and 2 days since the coyote showed up. The animal sat there with its gimpy leg, watching him with those creepy human eyes. Eventually it started to talk, and it told him it could help him get revenge. But first, he'd have to gnaw off and feed the coyote his own severed hand. His home was a grisly sight. It was tucked deep in that dark part of the forest where the gnarled trees grew twisted and hung heavy with moss. A vile smell hung over the whole area. Pillars of black flies swarmed above festering mounds of rotting flesh. The hook had cleared the woods around his cabin in a near-perfect circle, and on each and every tree he'd nailed, palm facing the forest, a severed human hand. He slammed shut the truck door and fumbled for the keys. There's no way Jeb's still alive, he thought, not after that. Kicking a case of empty beer cans out of the way, he keyed the engine and furiously pumped the gas. Come on, you son of a... Beside the truck, he caught something moving just out of the corner of his eye. Before he could turn to look, a shining hook shattered the window beside him, and then tore the door clean off its hinges. There's a reason we call new Echo agents green, and it isn't because they're rookies. It's because of the color they turn when they find out they aren't just in some kind of namby-pamby little outfit in which the worst thing they have to worry about is a motorcycle gang or a terrorist with an AK. The first time you watch a demon plunge its hand into your buddy's chest and rip out his heart, that's when you're green. The second time it happens, you're Echo Team. Atlantis, kids play. Zombies, no worries. Vampires, been there, done that. Ghosts, they scare the hell out of me. Anything a bullet can't hit ain't worth my time. Turned out this werewolf we were tracking once was actually a ghost dog. We wasted 10 clips and half a dozen soldiers before we realized that we didn't need firepower, we needed a priest. There is nothing like facing your own mortality from an angry spirit. Subject complains of frequent night sweats and sleepwalking. It is only a matter of time before his mind fully collapses. Until his psyche reaches the final rendition, we recommend Captain Byther remain on field duty, as he is clearly one of the most efficient and effective Echo Team agents. Do not recommend assignment to any cases involving dead children. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of hooves clattering across the old covered bridge. Samuel tried not to think about the town's shadowy past, about the horrible crimes spoken about in whispers behind closed doors. He smelled it before he saw it, a creature that reeked of loam and decay, bearing down on him faster than a car. The last thing Samuel saw was the flash of its blade as it cut clean through his neck. Legrasse had 1 point in advance of Professor Webb, for several among his mongrel prisoners had repeated to him what older celebrants had told them the words meant. The text, as given, ran something like this. In his house at Relia, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. The thing stood so motionless that I thought it was a statue until I saw its eyes following me in the darkness. When it glided down off the roof of the mausoleum and reached out for Sheila, it moved with the grace of an angel. With tears streaming down my face, all I could do was close my eyes and wait as the scythe struck again and again until my daughter's destined time of death finally passed. For when the darkness does descend, the force of good shall sway and bend. Cities crumble, defenses fail, and it is to him all shall hail. Of his name I dare not speak, for the curse it bears, havoc wreak. The transformation came upon him quickly. One moment I was dining with a man with a pleasant countenance, but when the smell of my blood touched his nostrils, he warped and changed. He could not help himself. Throwing back the table, the Baron stood to his feet and roared, his eyes the burning color of the windswept coals. Dropping the knife with which I'd cut myself, I drew my pistol beneath the table, even as the fiend began to shape wings and a mouthful of fangs. When she pulled away from the savage priest, I saw that she wasn't just drinking his blood, she was also chewing on the flesh from his throat. Holding up my rosary in one hand and my pistol in the other, I opened fire, but I only succeeded in finishing off the priest. Moving faster than I could follow the vampires on top of me, and I suddenly wished I'd had 2 things, some breath spray for her, and a clip of blessed bullets for my gun. When the curtain finally rose, the masked man was revealed on the stage. The noise, as I initially suspected, was that of a gas-powered chainsaw. The other noise, which I had not immediately grasped, was the sound of the theater manager gurgling his last breaths. The masked man had cut him up like cordwood, leaving his insides for all of us to see. Ignoring the screams erupting throughout the opera house, the fiend just laughed and continued his bloody butcher's work. The human body has 206 bones. Thus, this particular revenant has 206 weapons at its disposal, each of which can be used to kill. Back in 1906, it took 15 men to drag my great-grandfather down to the town jail to charge him with the murder that the rest of us knew he never committed. Never before had such an event taken place in the township of Montgomery, Montana, and every year from this point on the anniversary of that very same night when they hung him high, another one of the descendants of those 15 men dies a terrible and grisly death. On the same night that they poisoned, shot, stabbed, and threw Rasputin into the freezing river, she brought the wild man back from the doors of death and freed him from eternity. Now they stalk the night together, looking to commit a terrible vengeance against the ones who wronged them, and to take back the power stolen from them both by the ancient Order of Shades. Webs as thick as my arm closed off some of the doors. Translucent egg sacs filled with trembling puppy-sized arachnids were piled next to the air intake vents. At the end of the hall, a pair of web cocoons slowly twisted in the air-conditioned breeze. From the looks of them, the 2 security guards had been mummified and drained almost a month beforehand. Checking the fuel level on the makeshift flamethrower, Corporal Wrigley moved further into the basement, knowing that she was only a few more rooms away. We all hear about Rasputin's death by poison, blades, bullets, and even an extended bath in the icy Neva River. But what if the stories of his death were entirely fabricated? What if they were nothing more than a conspiracy to make him seem even more of a monster than a man? That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die.